I used to believe that love was something you earned by being useful. If I stayed organized, calm, and reliable, then I would be valued. If I fixed enough problems, then maybe one day someone would notice how tired I was and tell me I could rest. That belief shaped my entire adult life in America. My days ran on alarms and passwords. I woke up early in my small apartment in Chicago, checked my work email, then checked my parents' messages, then checked my younger sister's messages. Before I even brushed my teeth, I usually had 3 problems to solve. A card that stopped working, a streaming service that logged someone out, a forgotten password that somehow became my responsibility. I kept a long note in my phone with every login, every security question, every backup email. It was my real inheritance, a map of everyone else's life. If the internet went out at my parents' house in Dallas, I called the provider during my lunch break. If my father, Robert, forgot his bank PIN again, I reset it while standing in line for coffee. If my mother, Diane, could not remember which account paid the electric bill, I logged in remotely and handled it while pretending to listen during meetings. Nobody asked how I was. They asked if I could fix things. At work, I was known as reliable. That word followed me like a shadow. I worked at a logistics company in Chicago, moving goods across America and into Europe. My boss, Vince Kessler, believed stress was proof of importance. He liked to hover behind my chair, reading my screen without asking, pointing out tiny issues like they were personal failures. His questions were never real questions. If I answered quickly, I was careless. If I paused to think, I was unprepared. I learned to keep my voice even and my face calm, no matter how tight my chest felt. That winter was heavy. Snow piled against the windows of the office, and the days felt shorter than they should have been. That was when my Aunt Margaret passed away in Denver. She was my mother's older sister, quiet and thoughtful, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke. She left me a small inheritance, not life-changing money, but enough to matter. More than that, she left me a letter. I read it alone in my apartment. Her handwriting was neat and careful, the ink slightly faded. She wrote about watching me grow up, about how she saw me always carrying everyone else. At the end, she wrote a sentence that felt almost dangerous to read. You are allowed to have a life that does not feel like a punishment. I folded the letter and put it in my purse. Then I went back to work the next day like nothing had happened. A month later, my sister Nicole announced her wedding. She called me from her apartment, breathless with excitement, saying it over and over like it was music. Europe, Italy, Lake Como. She said it like the place itself would solve everything. My mother followed up with a call later that night. Her voice was sweet and tired, the voice she used when she wanted something. We just need a little help, she said. You're so good at this stuff. You always know how to make it work. So I helped. I always helped. I sent $4,000 for flights without arguing. I booked the rental car, coordinated arrival times. I built a shared spreadsheet with dates, addresses, and confirmation numbers. I paid the villa deposit in pounds because the owner said it was simpler. The bank charged a fee, and I barely noticed. Pain had become a normal expense. For a brief moment, I let myself imagine the trip. Sitting by the water, sharing coffee with my sister, feeling included, feeling like part of something instead of the engine behind it. That illusion lasted 1 week. My mother called again, cheerful like she was sharing good news. Oh honey, about the villa, she said. We had to make a small change. I was standing in the office break room, staring at a vending machine that hummed louder than usual. What change? Yes. We're giving your room to someone important, she said easily. A guest. Very important. I laughed because it sounded absurd. My room. Yes. Your sister's future-in-laws are bringing a friend. He has connections. It will be good for Nicole. My stomach tightened. And where am I sleeping? There was a pause, short but telling, like she was surprised I even asked. Well, she said, you can figure it out. You're resourceful. There's a hostel nearby. Hostel. In my mind I saw myself clearly. 30 years old. Working overtime. paying $4,000. Sleeping in a bunk bed in a room full of strangers. Meanwhile, my family would post smiling photos from the villa I paid for. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. That my mother would call back and fix it. That Nicole would say, "No, she's my sister. That's her room." Instead, Nicole texted me. Photo of first-class seats. Her legs stretched out. A glass of something sparkling. The caption read, "Living my dream." She added a heart emoji and wrote, "Mom surprised me with an upgrade. Needed this for my content." My content. I stared at the screen until my eyes felt dry and tired. Something heavy settled in my chest. Not sharp enough to be pain. Not loud enough to be anger. Just a deep, quiet realization. That night, back in my apartment in Chicago, I took out my aunt's letter again. The paper smelled faintly like her perfume. I read that sentence once more. "You are allowed to stop." Something inside me did not shatter. Did not explode. Simply went cold. Smooth. Quiet. Like a switch turning off. The next day, Vince yelled at me because a shipment was delayed by weather in New Jersey. He called me careless in front of the team. Then he told me to stay late, as if my time already belonged to him. I went back to my desk and opened my contract. I read every line slowly, for the first time in years. Vince loved to threaten people with one phrase. Non-compete. He said it like it meant the end of your life. "You leave," he liked to say. "You work in logistics anywhere in America, I will ruin you." But the language was sloppy. The contract defined the restricted area as within the United States and its operational territories. It defined competitive activity as services performed within that area. Words matter. Geography matters. That night I created a new email address. I filed paperwork to form a small company registered to an address in London. Not for glamour. For legality. For distance. For freedom on paper. The next morning I resigned. Vince smiled like he had been waiting for it. "You can't work in this industry again," he said. "I can," I replied calmly. "Just not where you think." He leaned forward. "You think you're clever. I know you're careless," I said, and walked out before my hands could shake. Home I moved fast. I sold furniture I did not love. Old jewelry I never wore. My second car. I closed accounts my parents had access to. I transferred my savings and Aunt Margaret's inheritance into a new bank. I changed every password and every security question. I removed my mother's email from recovery options. I did it all in one weekend, like pulling out stitches before they could heal wrong. Then I sent one message in the family group chat. "I'm safe. I need space. I'll send one proof of life message each month. No address. No explanations." I bought the cheapest one-way flight out of America. And for the first time in my adult life, I let my phone ring until it stopped. I landed in Lisbon, Portugal, on a rainy morning that made the city look like it had been rinsed clean. The sky hung low and gray, and the streets shone like mirrors. I chose Lisbon for a simple reason. It felt far enough from Chicago to quiet the noise in my head, but close enough to the rest of Europe that I could move again if I needed to. I did not want roots yet. I wanted air. At the airport no one knew my name. No one expected anything from me. I carried one suitcase and a backpack, nothing that tied me to who I had been. When the taxi dropped me off at a narrow street lined with old buildings, I felt something loosen in my chest. The room I rented was small, above a bakery that smelled like warm bread and sugar every morning. I told myself I would rest for a week, maybe two, then decide what came next. I underestimated how tired I really was. 3 days after I arrived, I woke up shaking. My throat felt raw, like I had swallowed glass. My skin burned, then chilled, then burned again. I tried to stand and my knees folded, sending me back onto the bed with a dull thud. For a moment, I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of delivery trucks and voices outside. I was alone. Truly alone. No family group chat. No boss waiting for an update. No one who needed me to fix anything. The thought was strangely calm. So this is how people disappear, I thought. Not with drama. Not with announcements. just quietly with a fever above a bakery. That evening someone knocked on my door. The sound startled me so badly my heart raced. I wrapped a sweater around myself and opened it a crack. A woman stood there, her gray hair tied back with a scarf, her eyes soft and concerned. "I heard you coughing," she said in careful English. "You need help." "I'm fine," I said automatically, the same lie I had always used. She did not argue. She stepped closer, placed the back of her hand against my forehead, and made a small sound of disapproval that reminded me of my aunt. "No," she said. "You are not." Her name was Elena. She lived downstairs with her family. She walked me slowly to a nearby clinic, one hand steady at my elbow. She sat beside me while the doctor asked questions. She held my bag. She paid for the medicine before I could protest. Back at my room, she brought soup and watched until I drank it. She did not ask why I was alone. She did not ask why my phone stayed silent on the nightstand. She did not ask why I flinched every time the screen lit up. She simply said, "Sleep," like it was an order I was finally allowed to obey. When the fever broke 2 days later, I cried quietly into my pillow, not from pain but from relief. Someone had taken care of me without asking for anything in return. A week later, Elena invited me to dinner. Her husband, Miguel, cooked chicken and rice in a small kitchen filled with laughter and clattering dishes. Their daughter, Sophia, sat across from me at the table, curious and bright-eyed. "What do you do?" she asked. I opened my mouth to say logistics, to make it sound small and boring the way I always had. Then I stopped. "I solve problems," I said instead. "The ones people pretend are impossible." Sophia smiled like she understood something important. "Then you will be busy," she said. She was right. When you spend years carrying a family, you learn skills you cannot unlearn. You learn how systems break. You learn how people avoid responsibility. You learn how one missed detail can become a disaster if nobody catches it early. You learn to see patterns others miss because they are too busy protecting their egos. I started small. Elena mentioned a friend who imported specialty goods and was constantly losing money to delays and fines. I met him at a cafe, listened more than I spoke, and asked questions nobody had asked him before. Within a week, I reorganized his paperwork, rerouted shipments, and fixed a customs issue that had been draining him for months. He paid me $800 and thanked me like I had saved his business. Word spread quietly. A furniture maker in Porto needed reliable shipping to France. A wine distributor wanted cold chain routes to England without spoilage. A medical supplier needed equipment moved through Spain without delays that could shut down clinics. I worked from cafes, from my small desk by the window, from anywhere with internet. I slept little, fueled by coffee and a sense of control I had not felt in years. I built spreadsheets that felt like maps of power. I tracked routes, costs, risks, and backups. I hired one contractor, then another, careful and slow. I spoke with freight agents in Rome, Amsterdam, and London like it was second nature. I negotiated calmly without fear, because I was no longer begging for permission to exist. On paper, my company looked unremarkable. Clean name. A registered address. No flashy language. That was intentional. Quiet businesses last longer. Loud ones attract the wrong kind of attention. Back in America, I kept my promise. On the first of each month, I sent one message. "I'm safe." Nothing else. Sometimes I watched the typing bubbles appear from my mother. They would hover, disappear, then return. Eventually, a message would come through, usually followed by one from Nicole. The messages were always the same. Confusion. Worry. Then, slowly, requests for help. Locked accounts. Missed payments. Fees they did not understand. I did not respond. A year passed. Then another. The number in my bank account stopped looking like fear and started looking like control. I moved to London, buying a modest apartment that felt solid and quiet. No extra rooms. No space for anyone else to move in and take over. I kept my passport in a drawer, not as an escape plan, but as proof that I could choose where I stood. The cold inside me stayed. But it changed. It was no longer empty. It was clean, kept me steady. Then one afternoon, an email arrived that pulled me briefly back into my old life. Subject: urgent. Legal notice. The name at the bottom was familiar. Vince Kessler. My stomach did not drop the way it used to. My hands did not shake. I opened the message slowly, calmly, like someone reading bad weather news about a place they no longer lived. He accused me of stealing clients. He attached screenshots and documents that looked convincing at first glance. He threatened to report me to authorities, to destroy my reputation in America and Europe. At the end, he wrote a single line that used to terrify me. I always knew you were a liar. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I smiled. Because I was not the only one who kept records. And Vince had just reminded me of a truth I had learned the hard way. People like him only feel powerful when they believe you are still afraid. I closed the laptop, poured myself a cup of tea, and began to prepare. I flew back to America without telling my family. I did not announce it. I did not hint. I did not check if anyone would be home. I landed in New York on a gray morning, rented a car, and started the long drive to Chicago like I was visiting a city I used to haunt. Every mile felt familiar and distant at the same time, like returning to a dream you no longer belong to. I wore a plain black coat. No designer labels. No sharp colors. Nothing that asked to be noticed. Confidence does not need decoration when it is real. I wanted to look like someone who had nothing to prove because I didn't. Before I left London, I printed everything. Not emotional proof. Not old text messages. Not stories. Real proof. Time-stamped audit logs from my systems showing when clients signed contracts, where documents were created, and which devices accessed them. Emails proving Vince's company had stopped servicing those clients months before I ever spoke to them. Shipment records mapping my routes from the beginning, showing they were built independently and legally. I organized everything in clean folders, labeled and indexed. Felt almost peaceful. I also brought something else with me. Curiosity. I had spent years fixing broken supply chains by following patterns. Where goods slowed down. Where paperwork changed hands too often. Where numbers almost matched but not quite. Vince's accusations pushed me to look at his operations the same way. Not emotionally. Structurally. Did not take long. I noticed a set of shipments routed through a small port in New Jersey. From there, they were moved to a warehouse in Pennsylvania, then shipped overseas under new documentation. The weights did not match the original cargo. The values shifted just enough to avoid attention. It was subtle, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. He was not just careless. He was hiding something. On a Tuesday morning, I walked into the office building where Vince used to stand behind my chair like a shadow. The lobby smelled the same. The floor tiles were still slightly cracked near the elevator. Some things never change. The receptionist looked up, startled, then confused. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Tell Vince I'm here." She hesitated, then picked up the phone. 5 minutes later, Vince stepped out of his office with a smile stretched too wide across his face. He expected fear. He expected hesitation. He expected me to look smaller than I used to. Instead, he saw me calm. "You made a mistake coming back," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "I didn't come back," I replied evenly. "I came forward." We sat in a conference room with glass walls. 2 men in suits joined us, his lawyers. A woman with a laptop sat at the end of the table, fingers ready above the keys. Vince took the seat at the head like he still owned the room. He slid a packet of papers across the table like a final move. "Evidence," he said. "Client theft. Contract violations." I did not touch it. I placed my own folder on the table and pushed it forward. "I'm going to do this simply," I said. "Your files are fabricated. Here's why." I opened my folder and walked them through it step by step. I showed the metadata on the screenshots. Creation dates that did not line up with the timeline he claimed. Editing accounts tied directly to his internal systems. Access logs proving the so-called stolen client list had never been opened on any of my devices. One of the lawyers leaned closer to the documents. His expression shifted, subtle but clear. Vince's smile tightened. I did not rush. I let the silence work for me. And now, I said, turning another page, we talk about your shipments. Vince blinked. My what? I slid the next set of documents across the table. Bills of lading. Warehouse intake scans. Weight discrepancies highlighted in clean columns. A rerouting pattern that made no sense unless you were trying to avoid inspection. The woman with the laptop stopped typing. She looked up, eyes sharp. I don't know what you think you have, Vince snapped, his voice suddenly loud. I know exactly what I have, I said. And I know what you have been doing. One of the lawyers raised a hand slightly. Where did you obtain these records? Public shipping databases, I answered. Client-provided documents. And the fact that repeated behavior always leaves a trail. Vince stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. You can't prove anything, he said, his voice sharp and uneven. I don't have to, I replied calmly. You already did. I reached into my bag and played an audio file. It was short. A voicemail he left weeks earlier when he meant to hang up but didn't. In the background, his voice continued, talking to someone else. Complaining about customs delays. Mentioning the New Jersey reload. Laughing about how no one checks it if the paperwork says Pennsylvania. The room went silent. One of the lawyers stared at the table. The other leaned back slowly. The woman with the laptop closed it halfway, like she already knew this meeting had changed direction. That afternoon, authorities arrived. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. Because shipping records and paperwork did not match reality. And reality always wins eventually. In the days that followed, the story moved fast. Vince blamed employees. Employees produced emails. Clients demanded audits. Investigators asked questions Vince could not charm his way out of. His company's operations slowed, then froze. The same systems he used to control others turned against him. I stayed in Chicago during the first week, working from a quiet hotel room. I watched the news without emotion. I answered questions when asked. I let facts speak for themselves. Then my phone rang. It was a number from Boston. I'm calling from a medical equipment distributor, the voice said. We heard what happened. Listen. We want to expand our global operations, the CEO continued. We want someone who understands risk, compliance, and scale. We want you to lead it. Vice President level. Full authority. I did not rush my answer. It was not a promotion from Vince. It was a promotion past him. I accept, I said simply. After the call, I drove out of the city. I found a quiet lake outside Chicago, the kind surrounded by bare trees and silence. I parked the car and sat there for a long time. I did not cry. I did not celebrate. I just breathed, slow and steady, like someone who had finally stopped running in place. That night my phone lit up. My mother called 15 times. Messages followed. Worry. Confusion. Relief that I was alive. Questions layered with guilt and need. Nicole texted. Are you back? Please answer. We need you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then placed the phone face down on the table. Because I already knew what "we need you" meant. Meant fix it, carry it, pay for it. And I was done doing that for anyone who confused my strength with obligation. 2 months after everything with Vince collapsed, I agreed to meet my family. Not because I missed them. Not because I felt guilty. I agreed because I wanted the story to end cleanly, with words said out loud instead of carried silently. I wanted to look at them once, say what needed to be said, and then walk away without wondering how it might have gone. I set the terms. Not their house in Dallas. Not Chicago. Not any place where memories could be used like weapons. I chose New York, a city that did not belong to any of us. I chose a restaurant where the lighting was soft, the chairs were heavy, and the prices made people sit up straighter. In places like that, no one raises their voice. No one creates a scene without consequences. I arrived early. I sat with my back straight and my hands relaxed on the table. I wore a simple coat and a watch I bought myself after my first big contract in Europe. Nothing loud. Nothing designed to impress. I did not need to perform anymore. When my parents walked in, I noticed the changes immediately. My father looked smaller somehow. His shoulders slightly curved, like he had been carrying weight he never learned how to lift. My mother's eyes were sharp, moving quickly, scanning my face the way she always did, like she was searching for the version of me she could still manage. Nicole arrived last. She looked polished, camera-ready, dressed like every moment might be posted later. She smiled brightly as she approached the table, then stopped when she realized I was not smiling back. Something flickered across her face. Confusion, then irritation, then caution. We sat down. For a moment no one spoke. Silverware clinked softly around us. A waiter poured water and left. My mother reached for my hand. "Honey," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "We've been so worried about you." I pulled my hand back gently, calmly. "No," I said. "You haven't." Her face stiffened. "That's not fair." I looked directly at her. "You treated me like a tool. Not a daughter. Not a sister. A tool." My father swallowed hard. "We didn't mean to." "You didn't have to mean to," I replied. "You just had to keep doing it." "And you did." Nicole leaned forward, placing her elbows on the table. Her voice soft and practiced. "We all made mistakes. But we're family. That has to count for something." I turned to her slowly. "You used my $4,000 to upgrade your seat," I said. "You let Mom give away my room at the villa. You posted about it like it was a victory." Her cheeks flushed. "I didn't know you'd react like that." I let the silence sit between us. I let it stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I spoke the part one had never said out loud. "2 years ago," I said, looking directly at Nicole, "I protected you from something that could have destroyed your life." Her eyes flickered. My mother frowned. "What are you talking about?" Nicole's voice dropped. "Don't." I did not look away. "You got involved with a man who was married," I said calmly. "His wife found out. She had screenshots. She was ready to send them to your job, your friends, everyone." Nicole's mouth tightened. Her hands curled into her napkin. "I met that woman," I continued. "I paid her $7,500 to stop. I took the blame for a lie you told. I did it because you were my sister." My mother stared at Nicole like she was seeing her clearly for the first time. Nicole's eyes flashed with anger. "You're bringing that up now?" "Yes," I said. "Because you betrayed me again later. You sold me out for cash." My father looked up sharply. "What cash?" Nicole looked away. I took out my phone and placed it on the table, sliding it toward them. A message thread filled the screen. Proof. Nicole had shared my old work details with someone connected to Vince, hoping to get money for wedding expenses when my parents' account started failing without me. She assumed I would fix the fallout the way I always had. My mother's breath caught. "Nicole." Nicole's voice rose, sharp and defensive. I was stressed. Everything was falling apart. The accounts were locked. Penalties were piling up. Dad's card got declined at the hotel in Italy. "And you were just gone." I nodded slowly. "Yes, I was gone. And for the first time you felt what it was like to live without my labor." My father rubbed his face with both hands. "We didn't know how much you were doing." "You didn't want to know," I corrected. "Knowing would have meant stopping." The waiter approached to take our order. I shook my head. "Nothing for me." After he left, I took a breath and delivered the final shift. "You remember the old property in Colorado?" I said. "Aunt Margaret's cabin." My mother's eyes softened. "She loved that place." "I bought it," I said. "Not emotionally. Legally. Through my company. Clean purchase. Clean deed." They stared at me. "I renovated it," I continued. "I insured it. Paid the taxes. I did it because I loved her. And because I wanted one place in this world that could never be taken from me. My mother's voice trembled. So we can visit. You can, I said. On my terms. Scheduled. No surprise trips. No guilt calls. My father nodded quickly, like a man offered water in the desert. Then I turned to Nicole. And you are not allowed there. Her eyes widened. What? That's insane. It's simple, I replied. You repay what you cost me in dollars in full. You take responsibility. You stop using family as an excuse to take. Until then, you do not get access to the one thing I rebuilt with my own hands. Her face twisted, anger turning into panic. You can't do that. I can, I said quietly. Because I already did. My mother started to cry. Please. We can fix this. I stood up slowly, steady on my feet. No, I said softly. You can live with it. I placed cash on the table for my share of the meal, even though I could have paid for the entire restaurant without noticing the number. I did it because symbolism matters. I would not be the family wallet. Not anymore. I walked out alone. Outside, the air was cold and clean. The city moved around me, bright windows, passing taxis, people rushing toward lives that had nothing to do with mine. Felt no anger, no triumph, just clarity. In the taxi, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Long apologies tangled with fear and old habits. I did not answer. Instead, I opened a blank message and wrote my monthly proof of life text. I'm safe. Then I placed the phone face down and watched the lights slide across the window, the city moving forward without asking permission. For the first time, that cold place inside me did not feel empty. Felt like freedom.